12 hours ago, a telescope floating in the cold silence of space witnessed something that has no explanation in any physics textbook ever written. An object 180 million kilometers from Earth, a dark, unremarkable chunk of rock and ice, tumbling through the void, transformed itself into a perfect diamond mirror in less than 40 minutes. Not partially, not approximately, perfectly. And the scientists who saw the data didn't celebrate. They rebooted the system, assuming it was broken. It wasn't broken. In March 2026, at 8:14 UTC, the James Webb Space Telescope was tracking a body known as 3I Atlas, a standard interstellar visitor classified as a comet. Its albedo, the scientific measure of how much light a surface reflects, read at 0.04. That means it was absorbing 96% of all sunlight hitting it. Dark, cold, ordinary. A piece of cosmic charcoal drifting through nothingness. But by 8:54 UTC, 40 minutes later, that albedo reading had climbed to 0.99. That single number is the reason there is currently an emergency closed-door session happening at the United Nations. Because a reading of 0.99 does not describe ice. It does not describe rock. It does not describe gas or dust or anything that has ever been observed forming naturally in open space. A reading of 0.99 is the mathematical equivalent of a polished silver mirror or a flawless, industrial-grade diamond structure. NASA's Deep Space Network flagged it immediately as sensor error. Engineers rebooted the telemetry systems. They recalibrated the high-gain antenna sensors from scratch. When everything came back online, the reading hadn't budged. 0.99. Confirmed? Here is why that single number breaks science. Nature does not polish surfaces in a vacuum. Nature builds craters. Nature scatters dust. Nature produces chaos. The entire second law of thermodynamics is built on the principle that entropy disorder always increases. Systems fall apart over time. They do not spontaneously self-organize into geometric perfection, but 3I Atlas did exactly that. In the time it takes to watch a sitcom episode, a 3 billion ton cosmic body reorganized its atomic structure from disordered, dirty carbon into a pure crystalline carbon lattice. The same lattice found in diamonds without any external pressure source, without any heat source, without any mechanism that physics currently recognizes as capable of doing this. To put that in perspective, on Earth, turning carbon into diamond requires 725,000 pounds per square inch of pressure, temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and geological timescales spanning millions of years. 3I Atlas achieved this state in zero gravity, at minus 270 degrees Celsius, in under an hour. When NASA's team at the Space Telescope Science Institute first reviewed the data, they called it a calibration error. Then the confirmation came from a second source. The European Space Agency's Euclid mission, independently positioned at the same Lagrange point, verified a 400% brightness jump in the visible spectrum. Then a third source, the ALMA array in the Atacama Desert, Earth's most powerful radio telescope, bounced a signal off the object and received back a specular reflection. 3 independent observatories, 3 completely different detection methods, 1 identical conclusion. The surface of 3I Atlas was no longer absorbing radar, it was reflecting it like a solid, polished shield. But what truly separated this event from any known natural phenomenon was not just the transformation itself, it was the sequence in which it happened. Data from the ALMA array showed that the crystallization didn't occur all at once across the surface. It began at the equator and moved in a wave toward the poles, a controlled, directional process. Imagine dropping a single seed crystal into supercooled water and watching ice spread outward from that single point in a perfect, expanding ring. That is precisely what occurred, but across a body measured in kilometers. A natural comet has no internal mechanism to align its own atomic structure. There is no geological process, no known chemistry, no physical model that produces this kind of ordered wave propagation on an interstellar object. By 9:15 UTC, the process was complete. Surface smoothness measured within 3 nanometers smoother than the primary mirror of the Hubble Space Telescope, and that was only the beginning of what 3I Atlas was about to do. Once the crystallization finished, 3I Atlas stopped behaving like a celestial body entirely. At 10 UTC, something happened that pushed this event from extraordinary to deeply unsettling. The object's rotational axis, which had been tumbling randomly the way all natural asteroids do, locked. The chaotic spin stabilized, and the diamond face of the object turned, not toward deep space, not in the direction of its existing trajectory. It turned directly toward the Sun, aligning its newly formed mirror surface to within 0.01 degrees of the solar center. The probability of a random asteroid doing this immediately after a spontaneous crystallization event is 1 in 4.7 billion. Rocks tumble. They drift. They do not stabilize their own rotation to face a star. At 10:30 UTC, the Sun's photons slammed into that crystallized surface, and the physics of what followed is something our greatest engineers have spent decades trying to replicate in a laboratory. In classical physics, light carries no mass, but it carries momentum. Imagine a stream of trillions of tiny particles hitting a wall every second. For a dark, rocky body, those particles are absorbed. The energy converts to heat. The force imparted is minimal and singular. But when a photon strikes a perfect mirror, it bounces back. That means it imparts twice the momentum once on impact and once on departure. The moment 3I Atlas completed its crystallization, it doubled the solar radiation pressure acting on its surface. And the object responded instantly. NASA's telemetry showed it beginning to accelerate not toward the Sun, but directly away from it, and not drifting passively, but moving with the consistent building thrust of a vehicle under power. Between 11 and 12 UTC, 3I Atlas gained 4.2 kilometers per second of velocity. There was no exhaust, no chemical reaction, no visible propulsion system of any kind. In the scientific community, we have a name for a device that moves purely on the pressure of light. We call it a light sail. For decades, theoretical physicists and aerospace engineers have worked toward building one, capable of reaching nearby stars. The challenge has always been the material light enough to be pushed by photons, yet reflective and durable enough to survive the process. Our best attempts using mylar and graphene tear and melt under the stress. 3I Atlas was doing effortlessly what our most advanced engineering has only dreamed of achieving. But a passive light sail, a piece of debris that happens to be reflective, would travel in a straight line directly away from the Sun, carried downwind like a leaf in a storm. 3I Atlas was not moving in a straight line. At 12:45 UTC, the diamond face tilted 14 degrees relative to the incoming sunlight. When you tilt a sail, you don't simply move downwind. You can tack, you can steer, you can navigate with precision against the very force that is pushing you. The trajectory data from the European Space Agency confirmed that 3I Atlas was now moving on a hyperbolic path that directly violated Kepler's laws of planetary motion. Gravity predicted it should be in one location. It was 4,000 kilometers away. This is what scientists call non-gravitational acceleration, and while we saw a faint hint of something similar with the interstellar object Oumuamua in 2017, that anomaly was subtle, likely explained by outgassing. This was not subtle. This was a deliberate course correction. Think of it this way. A boat drifting in the ocean follows the current that is nature at work, but a boat that suddenly raises a sail, turns its rudder, and cuts deliberately across the current implies something entirely different. It implies a captain. It implies intent. And if that wasn't enough to keep astrophysicists awake, spectroscopy from the Keck Observatory in Hawaii revealed one more disturbing property of the diamond structure. It is dichroic, meaning it reflects certain wavelengths of light perfectly, while allowing others to pass through and become trapped within the lattice itself. In fiber optics and laser physics, we deliberately engineered diamond lenses to do exactly this: trap light, bounce it internally, amplify it, and release it as a high-energy beam. The question scientists were now asking was no longer simply whether 3I Atlas was using light to move. The question became whether it was storing that light as energy. At 13:15 UTC, the internal temperature of the object dropped despite absorbing a fraction of incoming sunlight. That violates thermodynamics unless the energy is being redirected elsewhere. The missing energy, calculated to roughly 400 gigawatts per second, the equivalent output of 200 Hoover dams, was disappearing silently into the crystal lattice. 400 gigawatts of solar energy per second, absorbed and unaccounted for, vanishing into a diamond structure the size of a small mountain floating in space. If you accept the data, and 3 independent observatories have confirmed it, then the only logical framework that fits is this: 3I. Atlas was not just a sail, it was charging. At 1430 UTC, the surface geometry of the object changed again. The flat mirror began to curve. Slowly, precisely, the crystalline surface reshaped itself into a parabolic dish, the same geometry used in every radio telescope, every satellite antenna, and every solar concentrator ever built by human hands. And once that curvature was complete, the dish locked onto a specific coordinate in the solar system. It was not pointing at Earth. It was pointing at Saturn. More precisely, it was pointing at Enceladus, Saturn's sixth largest moon, and the single most compelling candidate for extraterrestrial life in our entire solar system. Beneath Enceladus's thick shell of surface ice lies a confirmed global ocean of liquid water. NASA's Cassini mission detected organic molecules venting from its southern geysers at a rate of 200 kilograms per second. Astrobiologists have described it as the most promising address in the solar system for finding biology beyond Earth. And at 15 UTC, a focused, coherent beam of solar energy, concentrated and directed by the parabolic diamond mirror of 3I Atlas, struck the south pole of Enceladus with precision. This was not a random flash of reflected light. The beam was targeted. The plumes of Enceladus, which vent steadily under normal conditions, erupted in a mass ejection of 40,000 tons, 200 times their normal output within minutes of impact. The probability of a random asteroid spontaneously forming a parabolic mirror and then focusing a beam onto the exact geographic location where life is most likely to exist on the most biologically promising moon in the solar system is, for all practical purposes, zero. But what elevated this from a staggering coincidence to a documented crisis was what spectroscopic analysis revealed about the beam itself. It contained technetium, an element with no stable isotopes that does not occur naturally on Earth and carries a half-life of only 4.2 million years. In cosmic terms, that is an eye blink. Its presence in the beam means one of two things. Either it was synthesized very recently, or it is being actively produced inside the object. Technetium is a recognized signature of nuclear fission. 3I Atlas was not simply redirecting sunlight. It had added something to it. It had encoded the beam. At 16 UTC, Enceladus responded. The composition of the plumes shifted dramatically. The ratio of complex organic molecules in the ejected material spiked by 800%. The moon was reacting, not geologically, not seismically, but chemically. The stimulus from 3I Atlas produced a measurable biological response from the organic material in Enceladus's subsurface ocean. When the Jet Propulsion Laboratory classified the spectroscopic data from that beam, when the European Space Agency went silent for 4 consecutive hours without a single public statement, the scientific community understood that what was unfolding was no longer an observational event. It was an interactive one. 2 frameworks immediately emerged to explain it. In the first, a Gardner scenario, 3I Atlas is a machine built to stimulate life on icy moons. A panspermia engine, periodically delivering energy and encoded biochemical signals to worlds with the right conditions, jump-starting or accelerating biological processes across the solar system. In the second, a harvest scenario, the beam was not delivering anything. It was extracting, reading the biological state of Enceladus, sampling the progress of whatever experiment has been running beneath that ice for millions of years, and transmitting the results somewhere else. The data from Cassini's archived mission records deepened this possibility further. The tiger stripe fractures on the south pole of Enceladus, the long, parallel cracks from which the geysers emerge, align precisely with the trajectories of historical solar anomalies recorded across millions of years of geological data. This may not be the first time 3I Atlas has visited. This may be a maintenance cycle, a recurring check-in on a long-running process that began before our species existed. At 1530 UTC, the beam from 3I Atlas stopped. The parabolic mirror flattened back to its reflective configuration. For a brief window, silence returned to the data feeds, the kind of silence that researchers later described not as reassuring, but as the quiet between movements in a piece of music that isn't finished yet. At 1615 UTC, 3I Atlas began its second rotation. The object turned away from Saturn with the same deliberate precision it had shown throughout every prior maneuver, and at 16:45 UTC, just moments before this account was compiled, the diamond face completed its arc and locked onto a new target. For the first time since the crystallization event began, the mirror of 3I Atlas was pointing directly at Earth. But it was no longer reflecting. The albedo had dropped to 0. The brilliant 099 reflectivity surface that had transformed a comet into a beacon had gone dark. Not broken, not melted dark by design. The mirror had become a black body, and in physics, a black body does not transmit. It absorbs, it listens. Let us establish what is now documented fact, confirmed by NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Keck Observatory. 3. I-Atlas transformed from a dark cometary body to a 99.9% reflective diamond lattice in under 40 minutes, violating the second law of thermodynamics. It used solar radiation pressure to alter its own trajectory in a controlled maneuver, defying Kepler's laws of planetary motion. It restructured its surface into a parabolic dish and focused 400 gigawatts of encoded solar energy onto the most biologically significant location in our solar system. And the beam it delivered contained technetium, a synthetic marker of nuclear activity that could not have formed naturally within this object at its current age unless it was being actively manufactured inside. These are not theories. These are observations recorded across independent instruments on multiple continents and in deep space. The one question that the United Nations emergency briefing carefully sidesteps is the one that matters most. Why does the beam contain technetium? Its half-life of 4.2 million years means that in cosmic history, it is newly made. If 3I Atlas is ancient, if it traveled here across interstellar distances over millions of years, that element should be gone, decayed into nothing long before arrival. Its presence means the object is either producing it now, actively, through an internal nuclear process, or it was placed there recently by something that understood exactly what signal technetium would send to any civilization advanced enough to detect it. A civilization like ours. Because here is the final, unavoidable implication of everything recorded on March 14, 2026. A probe that transforms matter, navigates by light, focuses energy across hundreds of millions of kilometers with nanometer precision, and encodes nuclear signatures into a beam directed at the only moon in our solar system, with confirmed liquid water and organic chemistry that is not a rock, that is not a comet, that is not a natural anomaly waiting for a better explanation, that is a machine. And right now, that machine has gone quiet, turned to face us, and is waiting. Whether it is waiting for a response, completing an assessment, or simply observing the moment we finally understand what we are looking at, we do not know. What we do know is that every radio telescope on Earth is currently listening. Every government with space capability has been briefed, and the data being collected right now, in real time, will define how our civilization answers the oldest question our species has ever asked. We are not alone, and whatever built 3I Atlas knew, long before we did, exactly where to find us.